Hello, everyone. My name is Armando Lopez, and I am super happy to welcome you today. In today's fast-paced world, digital transformation isn't optional. It's essential. But how do you ensure your tech investments drive real business impact? During this month, Improving's top IT experts will help you learn how to maximize your tech investments and explore industry-specific solutions that drive real business impact. You don't want to miss it. But now, I want to introduce our first host from this series, Don Sawyer. He has been a director of data engineering for Improving Minnesota since 2021. In his webinar, Multi-ERP Consolidation with Snowflake and SAP, he'll share how Improving's expertise, spanning Snowflake, DBT, data management, deployment, testing, and Agile methodologies, combined with the agribusinesses' trust in us and their active collaboration, ensured success. Very cool stuff. And now, I leave you with Don Sawyer. The microphone is yours, my friend.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And welcome, everybody. So we're going to talk today about ERP consolidation. In this case, it's using the destination of SAP. As a part of this transformation, we're going to talk through the upstream ERP, the multi-ERP platforms and the challenges that has. And then from there, I'm going to talk through at a few different levels, the solution. So we'll start at the very, very high level. We'll go a little bit deeper so we can see how the development teams approach this. And we'll talk through some of our other approaches and how Improving partnered with this particular client. All right. So first off, why exactly does this problem matter? Or why does this topic matter? And so I'll go through kind of what a lot of clients that we see, what we see when we go there. So imagine that we've got a lot of different teams, maybe different divisions running their own ERPs. So, and the first one maybe is a legacy system. So maybe this is an ERP that's been around for a long time, suits a very specific, maybe core business purpose, but is really hard to retire. Other situations, we have customized ERP. So a lot of times companies may purchase a software as a service solution or purchase an ERP, but then they heavily customize it to meet their business processes. And then add into that some of the other types of ERPs. So maybe you purchased a company and you have a specialized ERP for that company, or maybe as in the bottom left here, you can kind of see it's a specialized ERP that serves one purpose. Maybe it only captures, in this case, we're talking about finance. So ledger activities. Maybe there are no payables and receivables, but just ledger activity. If we have all of those 4 or 5, or in this case, even more than that, that creates kind of some difficulties. So one of the things that you may have here are some inefficiencies. This might be data duplication. So for example, you may have a customer that exists in each one of those ERPs, but they're the same customer, maybe different IDs or maybe different representations. So think about master data. You also have challenges consolidating this, which maybe this leads into reporting that doesn't line up. Maybe it's just difficult to create the reports, a lot of manual work. This again is where like master data combining reports can be an issue. It's the same customer not being represented the same in 2 different systems, and you got to figure out how to line those up in your end report. And in this case, if there's some time lost or some of these inefficiencies, you may have some missed opportunities as far as maybe if you're too slow, you may lose business. Or maybe you can't react to things from an analytical perspective, or maybe you just don't have accurate metrics for your analytics. So in this case, our client, they were an agribusiness, and so they have these multiple platforms. And what they wanted to do was be able to improve their business efficiency. By combining these, what it'll allow them to do is also to set the stage for their next set of IT initiatives. So one of the things that you find when you've got a lot of legacy systems, you're kind of hamstrung by the constraints put on by those legacy systems. And we'll get into more of that in a little bit. So our customer reached out to us, and what we ended up doing was we didn't go in there and do the whole thing. We actually partnered with them. So we were working alongside their business, their data teams, their integration teams, to help them solve this problem, which actually was really good because we ended up getting a lot of good collaboration out of that. But what that helped us to do is to transform that complexity into this unified system. So taking these bunch of ERPs that we had, then unifying those into SAP. So you'll hear me reference cFin. This stands for Central Finance. And so that's what we were trying to do here. So taking all these ledger, payables, receivables, integrate them all together so that they're all in SAP in the Central Finance module. Ways that we did this would include, we used Snowflake DBT, and of course SAP, and I'll cover some of the other tools that were a part of this solution as well. But also, I think the core thing with something of this much complexity, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of that complexity, is that you have to partner with all of the teams. You have to partner with your client. You have to build that trust, not just across your cross-functional teams, but with the client as well. In the end, I believe this really turned, from a pretty difficult and tall mountain to climb into a pretty good operational success. And in the end, where we're at right now is now our client can leverage SAP's modern capabilities and drive their business forward. So here's how I'm going to go through this today. So first, I'll talk through the challenge. And when I talk about challenge, it's some of the challenges of having multiple ERPs, but also the challenge of the consolidation and what that poses. Then we'll go through the solution. So I'll have a couple of different levels into this solution. So I'll frame it at a higher level and then go down to a lower level and then talk through how the implementation occurred. And then I'll go through our approach and the expertise that we help bring to the table. We'll talk through some outcomes. So let's start here. So imagine you've got a company and every ERP speaks a different language. They have different rules, they have different data formats, they have different volumes. This makes your operations kind of complicated. Hopefully this sounds familiar, because then this talk will be very helpful. But this really goes for any platform where you need to consolidate into a single platform. So now let's hit the challenges from there. So first off, what is the challenge? So we have the multiple ERPs. We have multiple systems. They're not totally unified. Some of these are very old, so they don't have some modern capabilities. And as I stated before, you end up with some of those inefficiencies. Your reporting can be misaligned, or you may have some of those missed opportunities. So we're going to go forward and figure out how to unify that finance function. Okay, so the challenges that this is addressing is, number one, ERPs are generally a very vital function to operations. And ERP, if you don't know, is enterprise resource planning. And so this kind of has two things. Number one, because this is a vital function, changing them and migrating can be difficult and expensive. But also, it also describes the importance of being able to do this. If you have inefficiencies in how your business operates, trying to get those on one system actually can really help, because now your operations can be a little bit more efficient. Another problem that happens is you have this fragmented data. And one example of this is the inconsistent data formats. So you're not always going to have this. There's not a standard ERP format. And in fact, a lot of the ERPs that are out there structure their data in a way, and there are other functions within the ERPs that make it difficult to actually just pull the data out and use them and combine them. Each one has their own different rules. I've gone through this with multiple different platforms and trying to figure out how they organize their data and the processes that operate on those data. Also, naming conventions are also an interesting thing, because I've seen some where a business partner is the same as a client. Sometimes they're in different tables, sometimes they're in the same tables. But that does make reporting quite a bit more difficult. And it's also difficult to align them when you have those different types of data. You also end up with these siloed platforms. So each ERP, oftentimes, because they don't talk to each other, they don't necessarily integrate well, they're kind of in their own bubble. And this can limit your visibility and coordination across the business, because you've got to be able to somehow extract data from these multiple systems so that you can combine them together. What also happens when you have these multiple ERPs is you have a lot of inefficiencies. Maybe combining data or combining analytics requires a lot of manual work. And doing work manually, especially when you are talking about not just one or two ERPs, but you start getting to 5, 6, 7. I've seen some where they've had 11 ERPs as well. That starts to become very, very time consuming, and building processes to combine those after the fact is pretty difficult. And then, of course, if you are combining data together and some business rules change, where are you going to change those? And what if it affects every ERP? So that becomes highly expensive to be able to accommodate business changes. All right. So really, for any organization, this is going to create, an organizational headache. But for our client in this case, this is affecting supply chains, operations based on seasonality. So in agriculture, you've got seasons where things get heavy, things get light, but that reporting is extremely important. And then you also have all these different operational rules for the different businesses within there. And so you really want to rely on Unity. And that's part of moving forward with the future of that business is how do we reduce some of this? So I keep talking about master data. So how do we end up one client or one customer is represented by one customer in our database rather than 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. But without doing some of these inefficiencies, you're going to lose time. You may risk accuracy. So reporting isn't going to be as sharp, but you may miss some opportunities to grow as well. All right. So let's take a look at this problem in a little bit more detail with this particular client. So I talked about 3 different types of ERPs. So let's say we've got the legacy ERPs. We've got customized ERPs. So these are ERPs that maybe you purchased and you heavily customized the rules within them or used their flexibility and made them not quite out of the box. And then if you have specialized ERPs that meet specific business rules or specific operational areas. Well, what happens here is you have a couple of problems. I'm going to talk through a couple, but the first one is I kind of alluded to before was you have these diverse data formats. So some of them have tables that are very straightforward that translate really nicely into SAP. For example, some of them are not very simple. And when we talk about formats, it's not just the shape of the data, not just the rows and the columns that are in there and the attributes that exist, but some of them also have differing how they handle data from a timing perspective. And some of them, maybe it's really easy to get data out quickly. Some of them, maybe it's not. So we'll talk about CDC versus batch in a little bit, but some of those are easier than others. So that can be an issue. And now let's talk. And then the next thing on here is complex accounting rules. So each one of these is going to have their own ways of how they shape the data to be able to do reporting, be able to make payments, be able to allocate cash or allocate income that comes in. But on top of that, each business has rules on how they handle those. So different customers might have different accounting rules. And in some cases, like a different ERP being, let's say, just take, for example, a specialized ERP that's there to suit one specific type of customer. Well, those rules are going to be very specialized compared to maybe some of your other customers. These complexities do make it difficult to also consolidate these, but it even makes them difficult when you're just trying to report on them. So if you can automate those complex accounting rules to be able to combine them together, that's going to make your reporting quite a bit easier. And then, of course, you're going to have these operational bottlenecks. So you have all these ERPs. Now you've got a bunch of manual processes that are bogging down your workflows. You might not be able to keep up with seasonal demands for some situations. Maybe you can't make payments on time or as quickly. That I wouldn't say that was the case in this case, but when you have things that slow down, your business can't operate as quickly as it needs to. And then the other one that I think was a big one coming out of this that I learned was your SME, your subject matter experts. So for each one of these ERPs, because they are so highly customized and they often have some level of IT or development support that goes with them. You know, if I have 9 ERPs that are from different vendors, I might have 9 teams of people that understand these. I'll take some of these big, maybe some of them can handle a couple, but there's other ERPs that are larger and more complex that have been around a while that maybe one team can't support 2 ERPs because they're that complex. So this wasn't really just a technical problem. It was a business problem as well. So it was this lack of unity was blocking some of their growth. So we want to get to that point. So I'm going to move into the solution here. And so what we did is we delivered that unified finance function in cFin. And again, I want to stress that we did this in partnership with them, not just by ourselves and then walk away. We've been partnering with them this entire time and continue to do so. What it did was turn those multiple ERPs into something more cohesive. So I'll talk through what we built, what it unlocked, and a little bit around how we keep that thing sharp and functioning at a high level. So here's the high level solution. So if you look on the left, what we have is our multiple different types of ERPs. And some of them have different requirements as far as how we even operate our business. Some of them need to be in near real time. Some of them can happen daily. It really depends on the business case. And so in this case, I've got 2 batch ones at the top and the bottom and then 2 CDC, meaning change data capture. So that's the near real time situation. But in the end, we want to get to that SAP. So our beginning is the ERPs, our endpoint is SAP. And within SAP, part of that central finance function is the data gets ingested or gets sent over to SLT, goes through checks and AIF. I'm not going to go into the SAP function itself, but in the end, it ends up in central finance. And so that would give our unified solution that people can do reporting, operations, payments, and all of those types of things out of there. So let's start with how do we get data out of these ERPs? So the first part is HBR pulls the data. So we've got batch, we've got CDC. HBR handles both of those. And then what it's going to do is it's going to pull the data out of the ERPs and it's going to put them into Snowflake. Within Snowflake, we've got in the first kind of, I kind of made these, if you're familiar with the medallion architecture, you'll see a bronze, silver, gold like coloring here just to represent kind of that layering approach. It's not exactly as a medallion architecture would look, but you can see it, the curation as it goes through the process. So we have raw and processed data. So it comes in as raw data. Some data is then enriched so that we can capture metadata, like if things were deleted or when they were last updated, when they were created. So that type of information is then added to the process layer. And for near real time, what we ended up doing to get from raw to process, or what the client does to get from raw to process, is uses streams and tasks. And then for batch data, that's moved using dbt with dbt Cloud. So now moving to that next stage of the curation, what happens this is where the majority of our work really came into play here as far as our hands-on efforts are concerned. The data gets pulled from those process data that are extracted from the ERPs, and we stage it. And part of the reason we stage it is to preserve what the data looked like at the time of processing. So one of the things that I firmly believe in is holding on to data provenance. So this tells us what did it look like at the time we processed it, not whenever we ran the model or the queries, because I could run the same model tomorrow and I could end up with different outputs. Well, if we have some sort of an issue and I can't go back 7 days, 10 days to see what happened, that becomes an issue. So this allows us to also, if there is an issue, reload data from the state that it was starting at staging, not from the process layer. In the staging to the model layer, this is where the data becomes more unified. So we're going to take the different business rules, we're going to apply them to that stage data, and each ERP has its own sets of rules. And so that's going to end up with a set of ERP specific tables. Well, from there, the data is then served through the consumption layer. And if you're looking at the consumption layer here, I changed it a little bit just to show this visual. But what you can see here is each ERP's data is in its own set of data tables underneath the covers. These are actually views in here. And by doing this with views, it allows us to have separate orchestration. So I can have changes and fixes on the underlying data without affecting the views. I don't have to affect any downstream consumers as long as I meet the contracts. But yeah, so you can see there, each ERP has its own set of data. And you might be asking yourself, well, why would you have different sets of data if you have the same data contract? And part of the reason for that is it does give us a little bit more focus as far as troubleshooting or changing rules or even just doing deployments. And we'll talk through the development teams here in a second as well. Okay, so now we've got this cFin data contract that's met by every set of ERP's data. So your payables, your receivables, your ledger, and all the extended attributes from there. So they all meet the same exact data contract. Since that data contract is consistent across, it's consistent to what SAP needs. Hightouch is our reverse ETL solution that was used to integrate from Snowflake into SAP. And so this is a very lightweight and quick reverse ETL solution. And it allows it to be able to simply say, give me any new data and send it through. And because we had separated the data, this also allows the orchestration for different things like some that are real time, some that aren't. And reverse ETL could be triggered when any one of those flows finished, and it could update simply the flow. So let's say, I'm just going to pick, let's say we were working on the energy business and that's in one specific ERP. I don't have to query all the other ERP's data if I know that it comes from the single ERP. And so those were triggered individually. So from there, this is how the data flows from a high level, from the ERPs all the way down to SLTs. So now I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that. Oh, sorry. One thing I missed there is there were other ERPs involved here too. So if you look in the bottom right there, there's the other ERPs. Not all ERPs had to go through this process. Some of them were very, very simple to just feed them into SAP, use SAP's programmatic languages to be able to convert that into the finance module. So in some cases, those were directly ingested as well. All right. So now I'm going to go through the ELT within Snowflake so that I can talk through how do we get to that unlock that reporting and have that unity. So I'm going to zoom into the Snowflake process at this point. So outside of HPR, outside of Hightouch, exactly how does the data flow through Snowflake? And this is where some of the complexity, how we were able to take multiple teams and apply them to this problem. So as I showed before, it starts with HPR. And so what HPR is going to do, it's going to ingest data, and you've got two paths there. You have going into raw using CDC, and you have going into raw using BAT. And different ERPs have different requirements. So I wouldn't say you would go real time here because DBT is not a real time tool. It's really more, it gets down to very, pretty small increments, so near real time. But as far as getting the data to process, you want that instantaneous or near instantaneous move from when it gets into the system into that process layer so it's accessible for the downstream systems. That's where streams and tasks come into play. For things that don't need to be as near real time, that's where DBT comes in and moves that data to the process layer. So both are integrated in this part of the system, but then from here going to get a little bit different. So from the process layer beyond, that's where DBT Cloud is very much used. And so for batch, generally these were daily. They were sometimes a few times a day. And then you have near real time where depending on the different use case, so payments might be happening every 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Or in some cases, we didn't have to do it quite so frequently. So maybe doing it every 30 minutes. Okay, so how do we get the data to flow through? So the first thing is to stage the data. So this decouples our processes from the ingestion process. And this allows the ingestion team to make changes or maybe correct if they have mistakes that they need to correct. They can do things without affecting us. Once we run the data, we need that auditability of what did the data look like when we processed it. And if you're processing from the ingestion side every single time and something had changed on the process layer, you lose that auditability. So this allows us to capture data the way that it was when we received it. All right. So now we're going to apply the different rules. And I'm focused on one ERP right now. I'll get to the others in a second. So now we're going to do some cleaning. We're going to align the data. We're going to standardize different attributes across them. And we're going to apply all those complex rules from there. Okay. So now that we have those rules, we've got all these complex rules. Now we're going to end up with what's called the model layer. This is the underlying table that will serve the integration layer. And in our case, the integration layer is the consumption layer, which I'll get to in a second as well. And then from there, that's where we create those views over the model layer. So notice here where in this case, this ERP1 is serving through the SAP data contract into Hightouch. What this means is the view itself represents the data contract that's required for the business process within SAP. And Hightouch is expecting these contracts, SAP is expecting these contracts, and so we can serve them exactly as those, and we do that as views. Now, here's the thing. This process happens for each ERP team. And so what we were able to do, okay, so now I've got all of the same things. Everybody's following the same kind of process from a development, from a flow, from a methodology standpoint. What this allowed us to do is have parallel development. With that parallel development, we could have, for all the ERPs, we could have a team represented for each one. So instead of trying to manage, let's say in this case, let's say we had 5 ERPs. As a developer, I don't have to have 5 collaborations with with 5 different business partners ongoing every day. I wouldn't really get any work done. What this allowed us to do is have focused business partners and business representatives focused on specific expertise in those ERPs, working with those SMEs from the ERPs. And each team was doing on their own, but because everybody met the same data contract in the end, it made it easier we already had that data contract figured out. And so we knew what we were working towards. What this did require though was a lot of partnership internal to the team, cross teams, to be able to get all of this stuff done. The beautiful part about doing it this way is now operation on ERP1, building rules, fixing bugs, doing deployments, things like that, don't affect ERP3 in this case. ERP3 is on a different cadence. They have a different release schedule. They have a different testing effort. And so this allowed those different teams to operate independently from one another. Now, how do we get to having this consumption layer when that's great? You have this transformation that gets data that's being inputted today into SAP. That's great. But at some point, you also, within your SAP system, you need to have that historical context as well. So we had to get the financial balances into SAP so that not only do we have what's happening today and keeping up to date today or yesterday or whatever, but also that historical context to be able to do historical reporting as well. So that's where you have sort of a migration or an implementation cutover. So what does a cutover look like in our situation? We had one part of the cutover, which happens at the beginning of the cutover. So let's say we wanted to cut over on September 1st. That's the cutover date. So that's right after, that's when one month closes and another month is opening. So what we would need to do is you need to take a historical ledger of all the balances prior to that cutover date, with the goal being that as of that cutover date, the live process is going to be turned on and take that financial data and move that through to align so you have the full historical context, including the current context. This particular, so our teams that did these were not as complex. So the rules are really in the live balances. Since these happened at a period close, the accounts or the books were closed at that point. So we didn't need individual transaction details. We didn't need to go all the way down to some of the nitty-gritty things. We really needed balances for the most part. And so the teams could build their migration processes. And that's why a team that was separate doing that, because the complexity was quite a bit smaller. So once they load the historical data, then at or before the cutover, and actually we started before the cutover, but we limited the live data that it was pulling in to. So if we had a September 1st cutover date, we parameterized all the jobs so that you could say, okay, I want to only load from this date forward, for example, or actually wouldn't load them. It actually always loaded the data, but the views allowed us to actually only see data from that cutover period over. So we actually fired those up a week before the cutover happened, and it was pulling data. It's just that nobody needed it and nobody would see it because they were only accessing it through the data contract, which is those views in the first place. So basically at cutover date, once the historical data is loaded, you have full historical context for all the balances and all the accounts at that point. Okay, moving along. So we've gone through the solution. Okay, so we've got that unified SAP system. Now, how do we help make it happen? So I'll talk to our role as experts and partners and some of the collaboration that really made this work really, really well, because I can't stress enough the collaboration between the business teams, the client, us, our technical teams. It was ongoing and constant, and probably was one of the most beneficial pieces of this, because we built that strong partnership so we can actually solve problems together now versus doing it in a handoff mode. All right, so the first thing, and just kind of hitting the partnership, so it's our expertise. So we are a technology consulting company, and so our expertise is really important. In this case, problem solving was really, really important because we had to tackle all sorts of complex accounting rules. We had to tackle legacy data, understand new systems. We had to develop logic that was even difficult for the experts to explain. And so the ability to make sense of the data that we were seeing to help refine requirements and refine transformations was crucial. And that was purely a problem-solving activity. But I think the other thing that we brought to that table was, because we are very deep in data management experience, we could also kind of see around corners. And so doing something like, hey, I should probably, if somebody says there's a relationship between these two tables or these two types of documents, I can go look at that and say, well, okay, so they describe this relationship. Let me see if that relationship holds true for all situations and all maybe document types. And so we can kind of help them see where they might have some other issues. Data management is another set of our expertise. So being able to handle the data volumes, how to store data in an efficient manner. So how do we separate data tables? How do we process them? How do we handle incremental loading? But also just some of the best practices. Bringing some of that allows us to be an example for how other developers might want to build some of these models, but also with the standardized processes and using best practices, we were able to actually shift people. So if we had somebody that was out on vacation, or maybe maybe they left or somebody got sick or something happened, they could shift over to another work stream and be able to, all they had to really do was understand the business process. I should say all they had to really do. That's pretty difficult. But the rest of the modeling behavior is pretty consistent across each of the different work streams. Our expertise in SQL DBT and testing was extremely important. Of course, SQL, anytime you're doing data transformation, SQL is going to be crucial, but really also doing that exploratory data analysis to help the business refine what it is they're looking for. So helping them find edge cases, helping them find scale, how frequently something happens. SQL is really important there. And of course, being that most of the work was done in DBT, knowing how DBT works, understanding how do we troubleshoot, how do we make that observable, how do we leverage testing. But then, of course, our testing was extremely important as well. These are complex rules. And so having good testing practices is pretty crucial. So being able to be organized and run your tests so that you're not delivering broken code to the test environment and subsequently sometimes to the production environment, our testing was very critical. Let's see. And then modularity and observability. So this is sort of the software engineering side. So not having monolithic code. That was a pretty crucial skill, because what we would have is you would find maybe an issue or a requirement or a business rule needed to be modified. Well, if you're building things that aren't modular, you end up having to refactor a whole lot of code. But with modularity, it allowed us to be able to modify things and reduce the risk of breaking something else when it was deployed. So for example, if I'm dealing with the debit table, and I need to make a change, well, if my debit and my account table and all that data, all the rules are built into the same model, and something changes on debit, I have to test account as well. Whereas if we modularize those, I don't have to do that. And then even some of the modularity came from extremely advanced use cases. We may have different models that are totally separate from some of the other data. And then the last one is on the CI/CD automation. So being able to automate our testing, being able to automate our deployments, being able to automate how we move code through the system, that did streamline the delivery and the efficiency. And one of the things that we implemented here, because we had so many teams, but the rules were very, very simple. So we're meeting the same data contract, but if there's one AR rule that affected one work stream, there's a good chance that it affected another. So what we did was we had a single PR reviewer, and that single PR reviewer could look for things that, hey, so-and-so on ERP1 just made this change that was similar to yours. It looks like it's the same rule, but your implementation is different. It allowed us to be able to see some of those. In case we missed that collaboration, it allowed us to see, hey, you need to implement this the same, or maybe get the team together and say, we've got two different implementations here. We should probably do this in a similar fashion. And so that PR reviewer really helped as a part of that automation process as well, because that's what kicked off the automation. The next piece, as a partner, okay, so our data engineering collaboration and our sharing. So what are things that we shared? We shared patterns. So oftentimes we were standardizing approaches across our different ERPs. Sometimes it was, so that state, let's just take, for example, like staging data before process data. That was an outcome of collaborating across the individual work streams. So we would meet, we had some teams that met every single day, but as a cross-functional team, we at a minimum met every week. And then if we had to, we would meet midweek as well if we had to had some questions like, hey, what's the best practice, or how should we implement this particular problem? We also had a lot of shared rules. And so like within an ERP, for example, how do we handle a customer ID and parse it out? That might be an example. It's not a, that might be one thing that we might do, is we would share across each of the different. So normally would have the ledger. So we have the general ledger, debit, and credit. So AP, AR, and general ledger. So we would actually share our rules across and make sure we were all following the same rules, because a lot of times some of those rules might have been interpreted differently, but they were supposed to be saying the same thing. And so a lot of times we were sharing rules within our ERPs. So for an example of this too is like intercompany and intercompany workflows. So money that moves within a company or within a company where this, the client has a stake. So that's an intercompany. An intracompany is just totally within the company, but it's not between a vendor or a third party and a company. those had very, very complex different rules. And what we ended up doing was we had a shared solution, a shared set of source tables, shared set of lookups that we all worked from. Instead of developing all of our own solutions, we collaborated and designed a shared solution that we then integrated into each of our workflows. We also, as a partner, had a lot of business collaboration. So we had to uncover a lot of quirks. So we spent a lot of time working together, looking at data, digging into the different data scenarios. One of the things that we did a lot was poke holes in assumptions. And so as a data person, that's something that we're used to is someone makes an assumption. We want to be able to poke holes in that and find potential issues and other scenarios that might be there. So we would actually do that with the client, with our business partner to be able to collaborate and come up with better requirements. That would help us clarify scenarios. So sometimes we would look at data that wasn't clear, or maybe the scenario wasn't clear, but we would look at the data and being able to do that data mapping together by collaborating with the business and having them explain what the business process was versus just the columns and the rows that we were looking at. Together with the business, we also refined ambiguity. So there's a lot of times, requirements come across and they're not really clear. And so we would partner together. We'd have a lot of different workshops where we would align on different problems. So like, for example, like making sure we understood that intercompany workflow, making sure we understood multi-currency rules across different like payables and receivables. And then the other thing from a partnership is making sure that we satisfied their outcomes quickly. So being able to fix and deploy quickly. So if a requirement changes or we misunderstood a requirement, being able to make that fix, deploy it quickly, get that feedback quickly, built quite a bit of trust as far as, okay, if they say something's going to take an hour, I know that it's going to take an hour. If they say it's going to take 2 days, I believe that it's going to take 2 days instead of, in some situations where someone doesn't trust you, they're like, why is that taking so long? So I think that expertise helped us gain that trust. But in the end, we did build trust. And so because we had a lot of, pretty reliable delivery process that was very thorough and they were very clear going through all the other, like the business collaboration, it was very clear that we were a reliable set of partners. What we also did, so in the end, we satisfied those business needs. So now everything is sitting in SAP so they can take the next step in their business transformation. And then what also happened was we were able to identify issues really quickly. So we built a different reporting. We built some observability tools and being able to say, hey, we've got a document that's out of balance. To be able to know that quickly and share that with our business partner was really nice. And that wasn't just a part of the consolidation, but that's really part of the implementation using, whether it was with dbt or Snowflake or whatever, and using the reporting tools that we use like Power BI. And then we also had, as a result, this good developer crossover. So as a partner with our client, this didn't mean, so if we started with, a handful of developers, let's say there were 8 developers on this team integrated with a handful of their developers as well. We ended up having crossover, which was really, really nice. So we had some developers, like they weren't stuck with 8 people. They could siphon some of those people off, allocate them to something else, or instead of having 8 people where half of them are sitting idle, you could reallocate them. And then if someone who rolled off the team, something happened in their workflow and needed to be fixed, it was really easy to have a developer step in and learn that space and be able to work on that. I wouldn't say that was the case for every ERP because some of them are still pretty complex, but for the most part, we were able to do that crossover pretty effectively. So in the end, we built that entire system. And I believe we also built confidence with our client to have confidence in us, as well as for our business partners to have confidence with the data. All right. So as a partner, there's kind of 2 keys to the partnership that made this project a success. There's the technical side and there is the business side. So from a technical side, be able to partner with our platform and integration teams. So we didn't own every piece of that workflow from end to end. There was a different team that was ingesting the data. That didn't mean that we didn't collaborate with them. We had to collaborate with them frequently, actually. So if we saw that there was something with the timing of a CDC, or we think that data got out of sync, or maybe that if we were looking for bugs within the tooling, we were able to provide that data, collaborate with them, be able to partner and give them the data that they need so they could do their jobs more effectively. So, and then we also partnered with each of the ERP IT teams. There were times when the business understood their portion of the requirements, we understood the data, but we didn't quite understand how to really tie the data together, or even why a set of data looked the way that it did. Being able to partner with these individual ERP teams was really beneficial to help sit down and troubleshoot. In fact, we had some really complex requirements where they could show me how they would solve the problem in their ERP. And I could use that to then translate that into, okay, here's how I would do that with the data that we have in Snowflake, which is going to be different because I don't have point and click. I have data and scripts. So that partnership was extremely valuable. We ended up partnering with our Scrum leaders as well. Anytime you have a project, there's times when the project does not flow or is challenging, or your business partners are getting frustrated. We actually sat down looking at what it was that the leaders needed, because they were trying to measure progress. They were trying to measure how much work is left, how long is this going to take, and they really couldn't do that at one point in the project. And so what we did is sat down and said, okay, first, let's just try to make this a little more agile, a little less Scrum or Fall, and kind of adjusted the Scrum process. But then on top of that, we reevaluated how stories and tasks and epics were written and rebuilt the Scrum so that now leadership had the ability to actually report on progress instead of saying, how much do you have left? And the developer putting their finger in there and saying, I have about 3 weeks left, or this is going to be done in 2 days. We could actually look at what work was left and make an educated guess as far as how long something was going to take and how far along we were from a progress standpoint. We also, because of our Snowflake and dbt partnerships and improving, that's really helped us because that helps us bring that expertise. So being able to have access to training, be able to try things in our sandboxes, be able to collaborate together internally as a team, give presentations and trainings to each other. Those things helped us become a better technical partner and help them understand best practices within these different technology platforms. On the business side, we had daily collaboration with the business team. This was good for both sides. That skilled and brought data expertise to the business side, and that brought business expertise to our side on the technology side. We would work with them and identify patterns and issues within the data. And what this did was it helped us to uncover some of those quirks, like different flows within the data. But it really helped us iterate faster on some of the data challenges that we were seeing. We asked a lot of questions. And when we asked questions, we would bring data to back up to help tie those two things together. Clarifying things like tax rules or multi-currency or things like that. But that helped to blend their insights with our technology and data management know-how. We had a lot of joint workshops, and this helped us to clarify requirements and make sure that everybody was on the same page and that we fully understood those requirements together. And then, of course, we iterated quickly together. There was handoff, but the handoff wasn't like, do this and then come back in a month. It was, do this, let's touch base tomorrow. And that's how we did it. So being able to have that daily touch base, having that daily Scrum call was extremely helpful. And then in the end, when we delivered, quality product, that built trust and allowed some autonomy for our team. So I'll quickly go through some of the outcomes that we had. So there's definitely some efficiencies here. So being able to report more quickly, reducing your manual work, and being able to combine data together. So unifying the data. So now you've got a single source of financial data. You can make better decisions because there's more consistency across the data. But also with that unified data in SAP, you're able to then leverage the SAP features. So a lot of the legacy ERPs don't have some of the things that SAP can do. But now you have access to SAP Analytics or maybe some of the other troubleshooting or monitoring or alerting. You have access to that for all of your ERP data now. And then, of course, now our client is future ready. So they can scale for growth. So some of those legacy systems that maybe wouldn't be able to handle the scale because of their processes, now those are in SAP. So we can scale for future business need. It's on a modern ERP platform. So instead of having 7 teams of experts, hopefully moving toward 1 team of experts, but then now they can start business transformations to be able to accommodate new business strategies. Whereas before, having all these different ERPs, like if I'm going to restructure how I look at a client, you're going to do that across a whole bunch of ERPs. Now they can kind of say, I can look at that across one ERP now and do that transformation in one ERP and if I need to update the business rules in the different ERPs, in the processing and Snowflake for the different ERPs. Okay, that is the set of outcomes. And I know we're coming up close to the end of time. So let me do a quick recap. So the challenges, we had a bunch of ERPs, wanted to get them into be able to have a unified finance function. The solution was to build that unified function in SAP, implementing the transformations and complexity with HBR, Snowflake, DBT, Hightouch. And our job within that was to partner and integrate with their team and use our expertise and collaboration to help them accelerate that project. And that was both partnering with the technical and the business teams for that team win, not an improving win, but this truly was a team win. And then, of course, in the end, we end up with faster reporting, a future-ready system. And for us, I think the thing that's really important too is now we have a client that trusts us, and we can share this success together and go tackle new problems.
Thank you, Don. Thank you to our awesome audience for joining us today, but special thanks to Don Sawyer for such an insightful session. What a great way to start our Unlock the Value month. Thank you, Don. And coming up next week on April 9th, we will continue this series with the webinar Empowering Thrivent's Data-Driven Future, Harnessing Databricks and Confluent for a Modern Data Platform with Scott Pauling. Until next time, have a great rest of your day. Thank you again, Don.